I was standing in my corner office on the 42nd floor, the Boston skyline stretching endlessly before me, about to sign a seven-figure contract that would cement Ignis Studios as one of the top digital marketing firms on the East Coast. My hand hovered over the signature line when my phone lit up. Dmitri. My brother. I hadn't heard from him in almost 3 years, not since I'd stopped answering his requests for money. Every instinct told me not to answer, but something made me pick up. His voice dripped with that familiar condescension I'd spent years trying to forget. Heard you're living in silk sheets now, Anya. That's good because we'll be coming to visit real soon. Don't be surprised if you see some of our old family belongings in that little house of yours. The line went dead before I could respond. My hand tightened around the phone as rage and old wounds flooded back. Through the glass, I could see my reflection, a successful woman in a tailored suit, but for a moment, all I saw was that 18-year-old girl standing in the rain with nothing but a backpack and a broken laptop. If you want to hear how I went from being that girl abandoned by her own family to the woman who built an empire from ashes, hit that like button and subscribe. You won't believe what happens next. Drop a comment telling me if you've ever had to cut off toxic family members, because trust me, this story gets intense. Let me take you back to where it all started. The Petrova name meant something in Boston. It opened doors, secured reservations at restaurants with year-long waiting lists, and guaranteed invitations to every major social event in New England. My father, Victor Petrova, had built his reputation over 3 decades as one of the most influential bank directors in Massachusetts. He didn't just manage money. He managed power. He sat on boards, advised politicians, and made decisions that affected thousands of lives. My mother, Eleanor, was no less formidable. She chaired the Thornhill Foundation, one of the largest charitable organizations in the region, wielding influence through philanthropy the way my father wielded it through finance. Together they were a force, and they made sure everyone knew it. Our home reflected their status. A sprawling colonial estate in Newton, one of Boston's most prestigious suburbs, with manicured lawns that required a team of gardeners and an interior that looked like it belonged in Architectural Digest. Every piece of furniture had a story, usually involving an auction or an estate sale of someone even wealthier than we were. Dinner parties were frequent and formal, with guest lists that read like a who's who of Boston society. State senators, CEOs, philanthropists all gathered in our dining room to drink expensive wine and discuss matters that shaped the city. My brother Dmitri was born to thrive in this world. 7 years older than me, he'd been groomed from birth to take over the Petrova legacy. He attended the best prep schools, summered at Martha's Vineyard, and glided through life with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. By the time I was old enough to understand what ambition meant, Dmitri was already at Harvard Law, dating the daughter of a Supreme Court justice, and being introduced at cocktail parties as the future of the Petrova dynasty. Then there was me, the unexpected second child born when my mother was 42 and thought she was done having children. From the beginning, I was different. Where Dmitri was charismatic and social, I was quiet and observant. Where he loved the spotlight, I preferred the background. And where he embraced the path our parents had laid out for him, I questioned everything. I discovered computers when I was 12. Our school had just updated its computer lab, and while other kids complained about having to learn typing, I was mesmerized. The idea that you could create something from nothing, that lines of code could become websites and programs and entire digital worlds, fascinated me in a way nothing else ever had. I started teaching myself HTML and CSS from library books, staying up late to experiment with building simple websites. It felt like magic, like I'd found a language that made sense when everything else in my life felt scripted and artificial. My parents noticed my interest, but they dismissed it as a phase. "She's just playing," my mother would say when friends asked about my hobbies. "All children go through phases. She'll grow out of it." My father was more direct. "Computers are tools, Anya. They're not a career. They're something you use to do real work like business or finance." But I didn't grow out of it. By 14, I was building websites for local small businesses, charging $50 per site and saving every penny. By 15, I'd taught myself JavaScript and was experimenting with interactive design. I spent every free moment online, joining forums, learning from tutorials, pushing myself to get better. I felt alive when I was coding in a way I never felt at the formal dinners or charity galas my parents dragged me to. The real conflict began when I was 16. It was the fall of my junior year in high school, and the pressure to start planning for college was mounting. Dmitri had just finished his first year at Harvard Law and was home for Thanksgiving regaling dinner guests with stories about his mock trial victories and networking events with federal judges. I sat at the table picking at my food knowing what was coming. Anya, my father said during a particularly lavish dinner party, his voice carrying across the table to where I sat between two of his banking colleagues. It's time we discussed your future. Your mother and I have been looking at universities. We're thinking Wharton for business, or perhaps Georgetown if you prefer to follow your brother into law. Either would be acceptable. I felt every eye at the table turn to me. This was how my father operated. He made pronouncements about your life in public settings where disagreeing would cause a scene. It was a control tactic I'd watched him use countless times, but never on me. Not like this. Actually, I said, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. I've been thinking about studying web design and digital marketing. Maybe at MIT or Carnegie Mellon. They have excellent programs in interactive media and computer science. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Dmitri smirked into his wine glass. My father's face went through several shades of red before settling on a dangerous purple. "Excuse us," he said to the guests, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. Then to me, my study. Now. I followed him on shaking legs, my mother close behind. Dmitri stayed at the table, but I could feel his satisfaction radiating across the room. He'd always resented the attention my technical skills occasionally got from my parents' friends, the way some of them would ask me about websites or social media, instead of fawning over his law school achievements. My father's study was all dark wood and leather with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined with law books and financial journals he'd probably never read. He closed the door and turned to face me, his expression colder than I'd ever seen it. "Let me make something very clear," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "You will not be studying web design. You will not be wasting your education or our money on something as frivolous as making pretty pictures on the internet. You will go to a respectable university study, something with actual career prospects, and you will represent this family with dignity. Is that understood?" "But Dad, this is what I'm good at. This is what I love. The tech industry is growing and digital marketing is the future of business. You could what?" He cut me off, his voice rising. "You could become some kind of freelance artist, scraping by on freelance work. Living in a tiny apartment, struggling to make rent. That's not the life we've built for you. That's not the Petrova way." My mother stepped forward, her expression softer, but no less firm. "Sweetheart, your father is right. This computer hobby of yours is charming, but it's not realistic. Women in our family become doctors, lawyers, businesswomen. We don't chase pipe dreams. You're smart, capable, and you have every advantage. Don't throw that away on something so uncertain." "It's not uncertain," I argued, feeling tears prick at my eyes and hating myself for it. "Tech companies are booming. Social media is changing how businesses operate. This isn't a hobby, it's a legitimate career path." My father slammed his hand on his desk, making me jump. "Enough. I will not argue about this. You have two choices: business school or law school. Choose one, or I'll choose for you. And if you're thinking about defying me, remember who pays for your education, your car, your phone, everything you have. This discussion is over." I left his study feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. Back at the dinner table, Dmitri caught my eye and mouthed, "Told you so." He'd known this would happen. He'd probably been looking forward to it. After that night, everything changed. My parents began treating my interest in technology like a rebellion that needed to be crushed. They monitored my computer time, restricted my internet access, and made it clear that any future in tech was unacceptable. My father started bringing home brochures from business schools, leaving them on my desk like threats. My mother scheduled meetings with her friends who worked in law and finance, forcing me to sit through lunches where they extolled the virtues of traditional careers. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. Late at night, after everyone was asleep, I'd work on projects using my phone's hotspot or sneak into my father's study to use his computer. I started saving more aggressively, hiding cash in places they'd never look. I began planning for a future I'd have to build entirely on my own. The next year and a half were a Cold War. My parents pretended in public that everything was fine, that I was their dutiful daughter planning for a respectable future. In private, every conversation became a battle. They'd bring up college applications, and I'd find ways to avoid the discussion. They'd criticize my choices, and I'd retreat into silence. Dmitri, now in his final year at Harvard, loved every minute of it. He'd call home specifically to ask about my college plans, knowing it would spark another argument. "How's the wayward artist doing?" he'd say when I answered the phone. Still planning to waste your life on computer games. Mom and Dad must be so proud. It's web design, not games, I'd snap back. And at least I'm passionate about something instead of just following a path someone else laid out for me. Following a successful path, he'd correct. I'll be making 6 figures straight out of law school. You'll be begging for clients on Craigslist. But sure, you're the one with the plan. Senior year arrived, and with it came the final showdown. College applications were due, and I'd been secretly applying to schools with strong technology and design programs. MIT, Carnegie Mellon, Stanford schools my parents had never discussed because they didn't fit their vision of my future. I'd used my savings to pay the application fees, written essays about my passion for digital design, and submitted portfolios of websites I'd built. I'd done it all in secret, knowing that if my parents found out before I had acceptance letters in hand, they'd find a way to sabotage it. In January, Dmitry came home for his birthday weekend. He was turning 25, and my parents had planned an elaborate party. They'd rented out a private room at one of Boston's most exclusive restaurants, invited over 100 guests, and spared no expense. The morning of his birthday, I watched from my bedroom window as a bright red BMW convertible was delivered to our driveway, an early present. My father came outside in his bathrobe, grinning like a proud papa. My mother followed her camera, ready to capture the moment. Dmitry emerged from the house, still in his pajamas, and actually jumped up and down like a child on Christmas morning. They hugged, they laughed, they took pictures. It was a perfect family moment. Later that day, after Dmitry had driven off to show his new car to his friends, my mother called me downstairs. I'd been avoiding the festivities, claiming I had homework, but I knew I couldn't hide forever. "Anya," she said, when I reached the foyer, her voice clipped and businesslike. "Your father and I have something for you." My father stood beside her, holding a small envelope. For one naive, foolish moment, I thought maybe they'd reconsidered. Maybe they'd finally seen how serious I was about my dreams. Maybe this was their way of showing they supported me. He handed me the envelope without ceremony. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single piece of paper folded once. No card. No check. Just a note in my father's precise handwriting. "Anya, you have made it clear that you do not value the path we have chosen for you. You have been defiant, ungrateful, and stubborn. We have decided that you need to learn about the real world, about consequences. Effective immediately, we will no longer be funding your education, your vehicle, or any other expenses. You have chosen your own path. Do not expect anything from us. Consider this your 18th birthday present 6 months early. Independence. Use it wisely." I read it 3 times, my hands shaking harder with each pass. Around me, the house bustled with preparations for Dmitry's party. Caterers were arriving, florists were arranging elaborate displays, my mother's assistant was setting up a gift table. My brother had just received a $40,000 car. I'd received a notice of disownment. "You can't be serious," I whispered, looking up at my parents. They stood side by side, united in their coldness. "This is because I want to study something you don't approve of. You're cutting me off completely." "We're teaching you about choices," my mother said, her voice devoid of warmth. "You choose to defy us to pursue this ridiculous fantasy. You choose the consequences. We will not fund your rebellion." "What about college? What about my car?" My phone, my voice was rising, panic setting in. "All being handled," my father said. "The car is in my name. It will be sold. The phone is on our plan. It will be disconnected. As for college, you'll need to figure that out yourself. Maybe this will teach you the value of listening to your parents." Dmitry appeared at the top of the stairs, drawn by the commotion. He'd changed into expensive designer clothes, ready for his party. He looked down at me, holding that piece of paper, and his smile was cruel. "Wow, Anya. Harsh. But hey, that's what happens when you think you're smarter than everyone else, right? Maybe you can build websites for food." Something inside me snapped. Every year of being ignored, dismissed, mocked, and undervalued crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. I looked at that piece of paper, then at my parents, then at my smirking brother. I thought about all the nights I'd cried myself to sleep after being told my dreams were worthless. I thought about the constant comparisons to Dmitry, the way they fawned over his mediocre accomplishments while dismissing my genuine talents. I thought about how small they'd tried to make me feel. And I decided I was done feeling small. I tore the paper in half, then in quarters, then into tiny pieces that fluttered to our marble floor like snow. My mother gasped. My father's face went purple. Dmitry's smile faltered. You're right, I said, my voice steady now, cold and clear. I have chosen my path. And you've just made it very clear that you were never going to be part of my success story. Thank you for that clarity. I walked back upstairs, my head held high even though my heart was shattering. I could hear my mother calling after me, but her voice sounded distant, unimportant. In my room, I pulled out the single backpack I'd been secretly preparing for weeks. I'd known this was coming. Some part of me had always known my parents would eventually force me to choose between their approval and my dreams. I packed efficiently. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop charging cables, the cash I'd been hiding, important documents I'd been quietly collecting. My phone buzzed with texts from friends confirming they'd see me at Dimitri's party that night, but I knew I wouldn't be there. I'd be gone. It was raining when I left, a cold March storm that soaked through my jacket within minutes. I didn't look back at the house, didn't say goodbye to anyone. I just walked my backpack, getting heavier with each step until I reached the bus stop 3 blocks away. I sat on that bench in the rain watching cars splash through puddles and tried to figure out what to do next. I had $800 in cash, my laptop, and absolutely no plan. I was 17 still in high school and I'd just been disowned by my family. My phone rang. Dimitri. For a moment, just a moment, I hoped maybe he was calling to apologize, to tell me he'd convinced our parents to reconsider, to offer me a place to stay. I answered, clinging to that fragile hope. So you actually left, he said, sounding amused. I thought you'd cave. You always cave. What do you want, Dimitri? I want you to know that you just made the biggest mistake of your life. You could have had everything handed to you. Instead, you're going to struggle and fail, and when you come crawling back, we're going to remind you that we told you so. Every single day. I'm not coming back. He laughed, a sound I'd grown to hate over the years. Yeah, you are. Give it a week. Maybe 2. You'll be sleeping on someone's couch, realizing that your little computer hobby can't pay for food and rent. You'll call begging for forgiveness, and maybe if you grovel enough, Dad will take pity on you. But your room, that's becoming his home gym. Your car, already listed online. You're being erased, Anya. And honestly, good riddance. You were always the weak link anyway. The line went dead. I sat there in the rain holding my phone and felt something shift inside me. The last tiny thread of attachment to my family, the final hope that they might care, snapped. In its place came something harder, something cold and determined. I would prove them wrong. All of them. I would build something so successful, so undeniable, that they'd regret every moment they'd spent trying to break me. I just had to survive long enough to do it. That night I slept in an all-night diner, nursing a cup of coffee and pretending to study while the staff gave me sympathetic looks but didn't ask questions. The next morning, exhausted and terrified, I went to the only place I could think of. Sarah Chen's apartment. Sarah and I had been friends since freshman year of high school. She was the only person who genuinely seemed to like me for me, not because of my family's status. Her parents were immigrants who'd built a small but successful dry cleaning business, and she understood what it meant to work hard for everything you had. I'd helped her with her website for a school project, and we'd bonded over our shared love of technology and our mutual exhaustion with prep school drama. I knocked on her door at 7 in the morning, probably looking like a drowned rat. She opened it in pajamas, took one look at me, and pulled me inside without a word. She made me tea, wrapped me in a blanket, and waited until I was ready to talk. When I finally told her everything, she didn't offer empty platitudes or tell me to reconcile with my family. She just said, "You can stay here as long as you need. My roommate just moved out, so the second bedroom is empty. We'll figure this out." That simple act of kindness kept me from falling apart completely. For the next few weeks, I slept on Sarah's couch, finished my senior year of high school while working 2 jobs, and tried to figure out what came next. I got a job waiting tables at a diner during lunch shifts and another job cleaning offices at night. Between shifts and school, I barely slept, but I was surviving. The college acceptance letters started arriving in April. MIT accepted me with a partial scholarship. Carnegie Mellon offered me a spot in their computer science program. Stanford wanted me for their digital design track. Each letter felt like validation proof that my dreams weren't as foolish as my parents had claimed. But without their financial support, even with scholarships, these schools were impossible. The remaining tuition, room, and board were more than I could ever afford. I made the hardest decision of my life and declined them all. Instead, I enrolled in Bunker Hill Community College's web development program, a 2-year associate degree I could afford while working full-time. It wasn't prestigious, but it would give me the skills I needed while letting me continue building my portfolio. 3 months after I left home, my grandmother Lena found me. I'd forgotten that Sarah's mother and my grandmother played bridge together at the community center. Sarah's mother had mentioned carefully, and without details, that I was staying with them. Grandma Lena put the pieces together and showed up at the diner where I worked. I was carrying a tray of dirty dishes when I saw her sitting in a corner booth, her silver hair perfectly styled, her handbag clutched in her lap, tears running down her face. I nearly dropped the tray. "Grandma," I whispered, sliding into the booth across from her. "What are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" Her voice shook. "Anya, baby, why didn't you call me? Why didn't you tell me what happened?" "I didn't want you to have to choose between me and them," I said, feeling my own tears start. "I know Mom is your daughter. I couldn't put you in that position." She reached across the table and gripped my hand so hard it hurt. "You listen to me very carefully. You are my granddaughter, and I will always, always choose you. What they did is unconscionable. I didn't raise your mother to be so cruel." Over the next hour during my break, she made me tell her everything. Every detail, every harsh word, every moment of the past 3 months. She cried, she raged, and then she got that determined look I remembered from childhood, the one that meant she'd made up her mind about something, and nothing would change it. "I have a house," she said. "In Lincoln. It's small, just a 2-bedroom cottage on 5 acres, but it's been empty since your grandfather passed 3 years ago. I've been trying to figure out what to do with it. Now I know. It's yours." "Grandma, I can't." "You can and you will. I'm 82 years old, Anya. I'm not going to live forever, and that house was always going to be yours eventually anyway. I'm just moving up the timeline. Consider it an investment in your future. You can live there, work from there, build your business from there. No rent, no mortgage. Just property taxes and utilities, which I know you can manage with your jobs. What will Mom and Dad say?" Her expression hardened. "I don't care what they say. That house is mine to do with as I please, and I please to give it to my granddaughter who actually deserves it. Your brother will get money. Your mother will get jewelry. You'll get the house and land. It's already decided." She pulled papers from her purse, deed transfer documents already filled out. She'd come prepared, had probably made this decision the moment she heard what happened. All I had to do was sign. I stared at those papers, at this lifeline being offered, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. "Are you sure?" I asked, needing to hear it one more time. "I have never been more sure of anything in my life. You take this house, Anya, and you build the life they tried to take from you. You show them what it means to be a Petrova, the real meaning, not their twisted version of it. Your grandfather and I built that house with our own hands, with love and hard work. It should go to someone who understands that, who knows that real success isn't about status or money, it's about creating something meaningful. That's you, sweetheart. That's always been you." I signed the papers with shaking hands, and my grandmother hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. It felt like being rescued, like being seen for the first time in years. The house in Lincoln was perfect in its imperfection. It was a small Cape Cod-style cottage, built in the 1950 seconds, with weathered blue paint and a wraparound porch. The 5 acres included an overgrown garden, a small barn that was mostly just a roof, and some rotting boards and more trees than I could count. It needed work, lots of work, but it was mine. For the first time in my life, I had something that was completely mine. I moved in 2 weeks later with Sarah's help. We cleaned, painted, and slowly made it livable. The attic became my office with skylights that let in perfect natural light for photography and workspace for my computer setup. The main bedroom became my sanctuary. The second bedroom became storage for now, but I had plans for it. The kitchen was dated but functional. The living room had a fireplace that actually worked. It was small, maybe 1,000 square feet total, but it was home. I named my business Ignis Studios in that house, sitting at a desk I'd bought from Goodwill, looking out at the woods behind the property. Ignis, Latin for fire, because I'd literally risen from the ashes of my old life. The logo was a phoenix, subtle but unmistakable. Every time I looked at it, I remembered why I was doing this. The first year was brutal. I worked my day jobs and built websites at night, slowly accumulating clients through word of mouth and online portfolios. Sarah helped by introducing me to people she knew who needed websites. I charged less than I should have, because I needed the experience and the portfolio pieces. I taught myself new skills through online courses and YouTube tutorials, constantly expanding what I could offer. By the end of that first year, I had 30 clients and was making enough to quit one of my day jobs. By the end of year 2, I'd quit both and was working full-time on Ignis Studios. I hired my first employee, a graphic designer fresh out of college who was brilliant but undervalued at her previous job. We worked out of my attic office, barely fitting 2 desks up there, but we made it work. Year 3 was when everything changed. A local startup hired me to design their entire digital presence, website, social media, marketing materials, everything. They loved my work so much they recommended me to another startup. That startup recommended me to another. Suddenly, I was getting calls from companies I'd only dreamed of working with. That's when Ethan Hayes called. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was in my attic office reviewing mock-ups when my business phone rang. Professional calls still made me nervous. I worried it would be a client with complaints or someone I disappointed somehow. Ignis Studios, this is Anya, I answered, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Miss Petrova, my name is Ethan Hayes. I'm a tech investor based in Cambridge, and I've been following your work. Do you have time to meet this week? I have a proposition I think you'll find interesting. I almost dropped the phone. Ethan Hayes was a name I recognized from tech blogs and industry news. At 30, he'd already made millions investing in early-stage tech companies, and he was known for his eye for talent and innovation. Why would he be calling me? We met that Friday at a coffee shop in Cambridge, halfway between my house and his office. I dressed in my best professional outfit, a blazer and slacks I'd bought from a consignment shop, and brought a tablet loaded with my portfolio. I was so nervous I got there 30 minutes early and sat in my car practicing what I'd say. Ethan arrived exactly on time, and he was younger than I'd expected, casual in jeans and a button-down shirt, with an easy smile that immediately put me at ease. He bought us both coffee and launched right into why he'd called. I've been watching Ignis Studios for about 6 months now, he said, pulling out his own tablet. You redesigned the website for Beacon Tech, right? And the entire digital campaign for Startup Weekend Boston. I nodded, surprised he knew about those projects. I've been in tech investment for 8 years, and I've seen a lot of designers and a lot of firms. Most of them are technically competent but creatively empty, or creatively brilliant but technically sloppy. You're both. Your designs are beautiful, but they also work. They convert users, they enhance experiences, they solve problems. That's rare, Anya. Very rare. He swiped through his tablet, showing me analytics from websites I'd designed. Conversion rates, user engagement time on page, all the metrics that actually mattered. I'd known my work was effective, but seeing the hard data was different. Here's what I'm proposing, he continued. I want to invest in Ignis Studios. $2 million for a 30% stake in the company. You maintain majority control, you make all creative decisions, but I provide capital for expansion, connections to bigger clients, and strategic guidance. You could hire a full team, move into a real office, take on the kind of projects that build empires. $2 million. I couldn't comprehend that amount of money. My entire first year's revenue had been $40,000. I'd thought I was doing well when I hit 6 figures in year 3. $2 million was beyond anything I'd imagined. Why me? I asked, needing to understand. There are firms with bigger portfolios, more employees, better connections. Why invest in a one-person operation running out of an attic? Ethan smiled. Because of exactly what you just said. You built a 6-figure business from an attic with no capital, no connections, no family support. You did it on pure talent and determination. That's the kind of founder I invest in. Plus, I've seen your work. You're not just good, Anya. You're exceptional. And you're hungry. That combination is unbeatable. I should have asked for time to think about it, to have a lawyer review the terms, to be cautious and professional. But sitting there looking at this opportunity that felt like vindication for every hard choice I'd made, I couldn't wait. I'm in, I said. But I have one condition. I want to create a scholarship program as part of the company, funded by a percentage of our profits. For students who want to pursue tech careers but don't have financial support from their families. Ethan extended his hand. Deal. I think we're going to build something great together. He was right. Over the next year, Ignis Studios exploded. We moved into a real office space in Cambridge, hired a team of 12 talented designers and developers, and took on clients I'd only dreamed of working with. Tech startups, established corporations, even a few nonprofits that I insisted we help at reduced rates. Revenue hit 7 figures by the end of that first year with Ethan as a partner. 8 figures the year after that. But more than the business success, I found something I hadn't expected. Ethan became not just my business partner, but my best friend. We worked long hours together, shared meals at our desks, celebrated wins, and problem-solved setbacks. He was brilliant, funny, and he believed in me in a way I'd never experienced before. He saw potential where others saw risk. He encouraged boldness when I was inclined toward caution. He challenged me to dream bigger. Somewhere in the late nights and coffee runs and strategy sessions, friendship turned into something more. It happened slowly, so gradually I almost didn't notice, until I caught myself looking forward to Monday mornings because it meant seeing him. Until I realized I told him things I'd never told anyone. Until he reached for my hand during a particularly stressful client meeting and I didn't want to let go. "I need to tell you something," he said one evening after everyone else had left the office. We were on the couch in what we called the lounge, really just a corner, with comfortable furniture where we held informal meetings. "Okay," I said, suddenly nervous. "I have feelings for you. Real ones. And I know there are about 100 reasons why this might be a bad idea. We're business partners. We work together, constantly mixing business, and personal is supposedly a disaster waiting to happen. But I can't pretend anymore that I see you as just a colleague or just a friend. You're more than that to me. You've been more than that for a while now." I should have been surprised, but I wasn't. Some part of me had known, had hoped. "Ethan, you don't have to say anything right now," he interrupted. "I just needed you to know. If you don't feel the same way, we'll figure it out. The business is too important, our partnership is too important. I won't let my feelings mess that up. But if there's any chance you might feel something similar, I needed you to know that I'm here, that I want to be here in whatever capacity you'll let me." I kissed him. It seemed like the clearest answer I could give, more honest than any words. He kissed me back, gentle at first, then deeper, and it felt like coming home in a way I'd never experienced before. We became partners in every sense of the word. He moved into the Lincoln house, helping me renovate and expand it. We added a second floor, turning the old attic into a proper master suite. We landscaped the property, planting gardens and building a deck that overlooked the woods. We adopted 2 dogs from a shelter, big mutts, who loved having 5 acres to run around on. We built a life together that was ours, completely separate from our families or anyone's expectations. Ignis Studios continued growing. We opened satellite offices in New York and San Francisco. Our client list included companies whose names everyone would recognize. We were featured in industry magazines, invited to speak at conferences sought after by the best talent in the field. I'd gone from being the black sheep my family discarded to being someone respected in my industry. Through it all, I never contacted my family, and they never contacted me. I was fine with that. I'd built something they could never take from me. I was happy, successful, and surrounded by people who actually valued me. Their loss, not mine. Then, 5 years after I'd left that house in Newton, my grandmother Lena died. It was sudden, a massive heart attack that took her in her sleep. She'd been healthy, active, vibrant, and then she was just gone. The funeral was at a prestigious cemetery in Brookline, and I knew my parents would be there, but I had to go. I owed her that much and more. I stood on the opposite side of the grave from them during the service, Ethan beside me, Sarah on my other side. My parents looked older, more tired than I remembered. Dimitri stood between them, wearing an expensive suit and an expression of practiced grief. They saw me, I knew they saw me, but none of them approached. We were strangers in everything but DNA. After the service, as people were leaving, my mother finally crossed the cemetery toward me. She was impeccably dressed in designer mourning clothes, every hair in place, her makeup perfect, despite the tears she'd displayed during the service. "Anya," she said, stopping a few feet away. "You came." Of course I came. I loved Grandma Lena. Yes, well, she glanced back at where my father and Dimitri were talking to other mourners. "She loved you too. Perhaps too much. She left you that house, you know. Against our wishes. We tried to convince her to reconsider, to leave it to the family jointly, but she was stubborn. She left me the house because she knew I'd appreciate it and take care of it. Which I have." "I'm sure you have." Her tone suggested she didn't believe me. "I heard you're still playing with computers. That's nice. A hobby is important." I felt Ethan tense beside me, but I put a hand on his arm. Let her think what she wanted. It didn't matter anymore. It's a business, Mother. A very successful one. But I wouldn't expect you to understand that. She looked like she wanted to say more, but my father called her name from across the cemetery. She glanced back then at me, and I saw something flicker in her expression. Curiosity, maybe, or the first hint of realization that they might have misjudged me. But then it was gone, replaced by her usual cool dismissal. "We should talk sometime," she said. "Properly. Family is important, Anya. Even when there are disagreements." "We're not family anymore," I said quietly. You made sure of that 5 years ago. Enjoy the funeral, Mother. I'm sure you'll put on a good show for your friends. I walked away, Ethan and Sarah flanking me, and didn't look back. I'd said my goodbye to Grandma Lena in my own way, visiting her grave early that morning before anyone else arrived. I didn't need their version of grief or reconciliation. 3 years passed. Ignis Studios continued thriving. Ethan and I got engaged at the house in Lincoln, just us and the dogs, and a sunset that painted the sky in shades of gold and rose. We planned a small wedding, just close friends, nothing fancy or formal. We were happy. And then on a random Tuesday, my phone rang. Dimitri. That call, that threat about coming to visit, about my house being full of family belongings, was the first contact I'd had with any of them since the funeral. And it shattered the peace I'd built. Within an hour, I got texts from my mother and father too, each message more demanding than the last. They were coming to the house. They needed to talk. Family matters required discussion. Thinly veiled threats about property rights and inheritance laws. I showed the messages to Ethan. He read them, his jaw tightening with each one. They want money, he said. Or they want the house. Maybe both. They can't have either. I know that and you know that, but clearly they don't know that. We need to be prepared, Anya. People like your family, they don't just ask nicely and accept no for an answer. He was right. I hired a lawyer that afternoon, had him review all the property documents and inheritance papers. Everything was legally mine, ironclad, no way for them to contest it. But legal right and actual possession are sometimes two different things, especially when dealing with people who believe rules don't apply to them. They showed up 3 days later. All three of them in 2 separate cars, pulling up my driveway like they owned the place. I watched from the window as they got out, looking around my property with expressions that ranged from surprise to calculation. The house didn't look like it had when Grandma Lena left it to me. Ethan and I had invested heavily in renovations. New siding, new roof, professional landscaping, the addition of the second floor and the deck. It looked like a successful person's weekend retreat, which is exactly what it had become. I opened the door before they could knock. This is private property. What do you want? My father smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Is that any way to greet your family, Anya? We've come to visit, to reconnect. Surely you can spare a few hours for the people who raised you. The people who raised me are dead or estranged by choice. You're just people I used to know. State your business or leave. My mother stepped forward, and I noticed she looked worse than she had at the funeral. Older, more worn, her designer clothes not quite hiding the fact that she'd lost weight. Please, can we at least come inside? We've driven all this way. Against my better judgment, I let them in. Ethan was in the kitchen, having stayed out of sight but within earshot. I wanted witnesses to whatever this was. They looked around my home with barely concealed surprise. The interior was as improved as the exterior. Hardwood floors, modern kitchen, custom built-ins, art on the walls. This wasn't the rundown cottage they'd probably imagined me living in. Well, Eleanor said, running her hand along the granite countertop, you've certainly made this place livable, though I still think Grandma Lena was foolish to give it to you outright. It should have been kept in the family. It is in the family. It's in mine. Dimitri wandered into the living room, picking up a framed photo of Ethan and me at our engagement. So you have a boyfriend. That's nice. What does he do? I'm a tech investor, Ethan said, emerging from the kitchen. And actually, we're engaged. But you'd know that if you were actually part of Anya's life. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. My father sized up Ethan, clearly running calculations about his worth and status. Investment pays well, I imagine. And Anya, what are you doing now? Still doing that web hobby. I run a digital marketing and design firm, Ignis Studios. We have offices in 3 cities and about 50 employees. We've been profitable since year 1, and we're on track to do $20 million in revenue this year. The silence that followed was delicious. I watched the information sink in, watched them recalculate everything they thought they knew about my life. 20 million, my mother repeated faintly. That's more than you thought I'd ever amount to, I finished. Yes, it is. Now why are you really here? My father cleared his throat. We've run into some financial difficulties. Some investments that didn't pan out. Some unfortunate business decisions. We find ourselves in a position where we need to make some changes to our living situation. And you want money? I said flatly. We want family support, Eleanor corrected. We raised you, gave you every advantage, and now that we need help, it's only right that you provide it. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The audacity was breathtaking. Every advantage. You cut me off at 17, disowned me publicly, and left me homeless. The only advantage I ever had came from Grandma Lena, who you fought against every step of the way. We were teaching you responsibility, Victor said. Making you strong. You should thank us. Thank you. You want me to thank you for abandoning me? Dimitri stepped forward. Look, we don't need a trip down memory lane. The fact is, this house is too big for one person. You and your fiancé could live in the guest house or something. Mom, Dad, and I will take the main house. It's only fair given that this was Grandma's house and we're her family too. The audacity left me speechless for a moment. They wanted to take my house. Just move in and take it. Get out, I said quietly. Now, Anya, my mother started. Get out of my house right now or I'm calling the police. You have no claim to this property, no right to be here, and no leverage whatsoever. You're not welcome here now or ever. You're making a mistake, my father, said, his voice cold. Family is everything, Anya. You'll regret turning your back on us. The only thing I regret is wasting 5 minutes on this conversation. Leave. Now. They left, but slowly making it clear they were choosing to go, not being forced. As they reached their cars, Dimitri turned back. We're not done with this. That house should belong to the family, and we're going to prove it. Grandma Lena wasn't in her right mind when she changed her will. We'll see you in court. They drove away, and I stood on my porch shaking with rage and adrenaline. Ethan came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. They're going to try something, he said. People like that don't just accept defeat. Let them try. Everything is documented, legal, and ironclad. They have no case. But Ethan was right. They were going to try something. I just didn't know how far they'd be willing to go. 2 weeks later, Ethan and I had to fly to San Francisco for a series of client meetings. It was a quick trip, just 3 days, and we'd done it dozens of times before. We set the security system, asked Sarah to check on the dogs at her kennel where we'd boarded them, and caught our flight. The meetings went well. We landed 2 new major clients and solidified partnerships with 3 existing ones. We were celebrating over dinner at a waterfront restaurant when my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Anya, something's wrong. I drove by your house to water your plants, and there are cars in the driveway. A moving truck. I think someone's inside. My blood turned to ice. I pulled up the security camera app on my phone with shaking hands, Ethan leaning over my shoulder to see. There, in high definition, was my father using a crowbar on my back door. The door I'd installed with Ethan picking out hardware and paint colors together. My mother was directing 2 men with dollies as they carried furniture into my house. My house. And Dimitri was in my living room hanging pictures on my walls, acting like he owned the place. Call the police, Ethan said already, pulling out his phone to book us on the next flight home. Right now, Anya. Call them. I called 911, but I wasn't in Massachusetts. I had to explain the situation to a dispatcher who transferred me to local police in Lincoln. The officer who answered sounded skeptical. Ma'am, are you sure this isn't a misunderstanding? Family members with a key. They don't have a key. They broke in. I have video evidence. Please, you need to send someone there now before they destroy or steal everything I own. We'll send a unit to check it out. But ma'am, if these are your parents and they claim this is a family property dispute, officers can't forcibly remove them without a court order. This might be a civil matter, not criminal. They broke my door down with a crowbar. How is that civil? But the officer was already explaining procedures and property laws, and I could feel the situation slipping out of my control. I hung up and called Dimitri, my hands shaking so hard I could barely dial. He answered on the first ring, sounding relaxed and pleased with himself. Anya. Perfect timing. We're just getting settled in. The master bedroom has great light. Mom's already picking out new curtains. What the hell do you think you're doing? We're moving in. The house belongs to the family, and since you refuse to be reasonable about sharing it, we've decided to just handle this ourselves. If you want to fight about it, we'll see you in court. But possession is 9/10 of the law, and we're in possession now. I have video of Dad breaking down my door. That's breaking and entering. That's burglary. You're going to be arrested. He laughed, actually laughed. By the time you get back here, if you get back here, we'll have changed all the locks and moved our stuff in. Good luck proving anything. Besides, we're family. This is a family home. No judge is going to side with you over us. I'm the legal owner. My name is on the deed. Yeah, about that. Dad has some questions about whether Grandma was competent when she signed that deed over to you. She was 82, Anya. Maybe she was confused. Maybe you manipulated a vulnerable old woman. We're exploring our legal options. I wanted to reach through the phone and strangle him. You didn't even like Grandma Lena. None of you did. You ignored her for years. Now that's just not true. We loved Mom's mother. It's sad that you've convinced yourself otherwise. Anyway, I've gotta go. Mom needs help hanging these family photos. Your pictures are in a box by the door if you want them. Might be wet though. It's raining. The call ended. I sat there in that expensive San Francisco restaurant surrounded by successful people celebrating their victories and felt like I was 17 again, standing in the rain with nowhere to go. We're going home, Ethan said, showing me his phone. Red-eye flight leaves in 3 hours. I've already called our lawyer. He's meeting us at the house tomorrow morning. That night was the longest of my life. The flight felt like it took days instead of hours. I monitored the security cameras, obsessively watching my family systematically take over my home. My mother had indeed hung family photos, pictures of the 4 of them at various events I'd never been invited to. They'd moved my things into boxes and stacked them in the garage. My father had taken over my home office, setting up his laptop and files like it was his space. Dmitri had claimed the guest room, unpacking suitcases full of clothes and toiletries. They were acting like they lived there. Like it was the most natural thing in the world for them to break into my home and claim it as their own. We landed in Boston at 6 in the morning. Ethan had rented a car at the airport, and we drove straight to Lincoln, arriving just as the sun was coming up. The moving truck was gone, but both my parents' cars were still in the driveway along with Dimitri's BMW. My house, my sanctuary, had been invaded. I walked up to the front door, Ethan right behind me, and tried my key. It still worked. They hadn't changed the locks yet, probably because they didn't want to damage the door further and leave more evidence. Small mercies. I opened the door to my home and barely recognized it. The smell was different, a combination of my mother's perfume and my father's cologne. The furniture had been rearranged. Their belongings were everywhere, coats on my hooks, shoes by my door briefcases, and purses on my console table. It was a violation seeing their things in my space, marking their territory. They were in my kitchen, all 3 of them having breakfast. My food, my coffee, using my dishes. They looked up when we walked in, and my mother actually smiled. "Oh, good, you're home. We need to discuss sleeping arrangements. The master bedroom is really perfect for your father and me, and Dmitri has the guest room, so you and your fiancé will need to set up in the finished basement. It's not ideal, but it's temporary until we can add an addition." I stared at her, unable to process the sheer delusion required to think this was okay. "You need to leave. Right now. All of you." My father set down his coffee cup, calm and unruffled. "Anya, let's be reasonable. This house is too large for 2 people, and your mother and I need a place to live. We've hit a rough patch financially, and family helps family. That's how it works. You're not my family. You haven't been my family since you threw me out 10 years ago." "Water under the bridge," Eleanor said, waving her hand dismissively. "We're here now, and we're staying. If you have a problem with that, you can take it up with our lawyer. We're contesting Grandma Lena's will on the grounds of diminished capacity and undue influence. You have no case. We'll see about that. In the meantime, we live here. All of us. Like a family should." I pulled out my phone, and this time I was ready. I'd spent the entire flight documenting everything, compiling evidence, preparing. I opened my photos and video app and held it up. "Do you see this? This is video footage of Dad using a crowbar to break down my back door at 2:47 p.m. on Tuesday. That's breaking and entering a felony in Massachusetts. This video shows Mom directing the moving of my personal belongings without permission, which is theft. And this video shows Dmitri changing the locks on my bedroom door, which is unlawful occupancy. I have 13 hours of footage documenting every illegal thing you've done." My father's confidence faltered slightly. "Those videos won't hold up. We're family, and this is a family property dispute." "No, it's not. This is my property, legally deeded to me by my grandmother 8 years ago. My name is on all the paperwork, all the utilities, all the tax documents. You have no legal claim, no right to be here, and no defense against criminal charges." I dialed 911, putting it on speaker so they could all hear. The operator answered, and I spoke clearly and calmly. "I need to report a home invasion and burglary in progress. 3 individuals forcibly entered my property while I was out of state, broke down my door, moved their belongings in, and are refusing to leave. I have extensive video evidence of the break-in and I'm prepared to press charges. I'm at the property now and requesting immediate police assistance. The operator took my information and assured me officers were being dispatched. I hung up and looked at my parents. You have 20 minutes before they arrive. I suggest you start packing. Eleanor's face went pale. Victor stood up his chair, scraping loudly against my floor. You wouldn't actually have your own parents arrested. Watch me. I've already sent all the video evidence to my lawyer and the police department. You broke into my home, you violated my property, and you threatened me. I'm not 17 anymore. I'm not scared of you. And I'm not backing down. Dimitri was the first to break, rushing toward the guest room. This is insane. You're going to regret this, Anya. The only thing I regret is answering the door when you first showed up. Now pack your shit and get out of my house. The police arrived in 12 minutes, 2 patrol cars with 4 officers. I showed them the video evidence, the property deed, the police report I'd filed while on the phone the night before. I showed them the damaged back door, the evidence of forced entry, my belongings boxed up and moved without permission. The officers reviewed everything carefully, asked questions, and then approached my parents. Sir, ma'am, you need to vacate this property immediately. You're trespassing, and there's evidence of breaking and entering. You can leave voluntarily now, or we can arrest you for criminal trespass, breaking and entering, and vandalism. Your choice. My mother tried to cry those fake tears she'd perfected over years of charity galas. But we're family. This is a family matter, not a criminal matter. She's being vindictive because of old grudges. Ma'am, regardless of your relationship, this is her legal property and you broke in. That's a crime. You have 30 minutes to collect your belongings and leave, or you'll be placed under arrest. Victor tried to argue about property laws and family rights, but the officers weren't interested. They'd seen the evidence, they knew the law, and they weren't going to be swayed by smooth talk or attempts at manipulation. My family scrambled to gather their things, throwing clothes into suitcases, grabbing toiletries from my bathroom, stuffing belongings into garbage bags when they ran out of luggage. The officers supervised making sure nothing of mine was taken, documenting everything for the report. Eleanor stopped in front of me on her way out, her carefully applied makeup streaking from real tears now. I hope you're happy. You've destroyed this family. I didn't destroy anything. You did that yourself 10 years ago. I just refuse to be your victim anymore. Dimitri was next, carrying 2 suitcases and a duffel bag, his face red with rage. This isn't over. We're going to take you to court, we're going to challenge that will, and we're going to get what we deserve. What you deserve is exactly what you're getting. Nothing. My father was last, and his expression was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. Pure hatred barely contained. You're going to regret this, Anya. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday you'll need family, and we won't be there. You'll be alone and you'll remember this moment. I'm already alone as far as family goes, Dad. The difference is I chose it, and I've never been happier. They loaded their cars and drove away the officers, ensuring they actually left the property. The senior officer stayed behind to help me document the damage and file a formal report. Are you planning to press charges? He asked. Yes. All of them. Good. You have solid evidence, and this is clearly criminal trespass and breaking and entering. They'll likely be charged, and given the video evidence, conviction is probable. They'll probably try to plead it down to a misdemeanor with probation, but there will be consequences. What about the will they said they're going to contest? I'm not a lawyer, ma'am, but from what you've shown me, your claim to this property seems ironclad. Their best bet would have been to claim undue influence when the will was first executed, but that was 8 years ago. Statutes of limitations apply. They've got no case, but they might try anyway out of spite. Talk to your lawyer. After the officer left, I stood in my living room surrounded by the debris of my family's invasion and felt exhausted. Ethan had been quietly photographing all the damage, collecting evidence, being the support I needed without being asked. He finished and came to stand beside me, pulling me into his arms. It's over, he said quietly. They're gone and they're not coming back. But it wasn't over. Not yet. The next 3 months were a legal nightmare. My parents did try to contest Grandma Lena's will, claiming she'd been manipulated and wasn't competent. They hired an expensive lawyer and filed motions with the probate court. I had to hire my own lawyer, review 8 years of documents, and prepare to defend my ownership of the house. But their case was weak, almost laughably so. Grandma Lena had been evaluated by her doctor 6 months before transferring the deed, declared perfectly competent. She'd worked with her own lawyer, not mine, to ensure everything was legal and above board. There were witnesses to her decision, including her financial advisor and best friend, both of whom testified that she'd been clear-minded and determined to leave the house to me. The criminal case was even more straightforward. With the video evidence and police reports, the district attorney had no trouble bringing charges. Breaking and entering, criminal trespass, attempted theft. Victor and Dimitri were formally charged with felonies. Eleanor was charged with accessory after the fact for helping them move items and establish residency. They tried to fight it, tried to claim family disputes weren't criminal matters, tried to paint me as vindictive and unreasonable. But the evidence was overwhelming, and eventually their lawyer advised them to take a plea deal. Victor and Dimitri pleaded guilty to reduced charges, criminal trespass, and vandalism in exchange for suspended sentences, 3 years probation, and a restraining order, keeping them 500 feet away from me and my property. Eleanor pleaded to a misdemeanor and received a year of probation. They all had to pay restitution for the damage to my home plus court costs and my legal fees. But the real punishment was the public record. In Boston's social circles, criminal charges carry weight. My father's remaining business connections dried up. My mother was quietly removed from every board and committee she'd sat on. Dimitri's law license was suspended pending a character and fitness review, and even after it was reinstated, his career prospects were permanently damaged. The Petrova name, which had once opened doors, now raised eyebrows and closed opportunities. I felt no triumph in their downfall, but I felt no guilt either. They'd made their choices, and choices have consequences. They'd tried to teach me that lesson when I was 17. Now they were learning it themselves. With the legal battles resolved, I could finally focus on healing. Ethan and I repaired the damage to the house, not just the physical destruction from the break-in, but the emotional violation of having our sanctuary invaded. We repainted rooms, replaced the damaged door, rearranged furniture. We reclaimed our space. Ignis Studios continued to grow now, managing projects for some of the biggest names in tech. We'd become known not just for great design, but for our company culture and ethics. The Lena's Legacy Scholarship Fund, which we'd established in my grandmother's honor, had funded 30 students through college, and many of them now worked in tech careers or had started their own companies. Ethan proposed that we formalize our relationship not with a big wedding, but with a simple ceremony at the house, just us and Sarah and a handful of close friends. We were married on the deck overlooking the woods with our 2 dogs as witnesses and a justice of the peace who cried through the whole ceremony. It was perfect. 6 months after the wedding, I found out I was pregnant. The news filled me with joy and terror in equal measure. I'd never had a good example of parenthood, never seen what a healthy family looked like. But Ethan held my hand and reminded me that we'd figure it out together, that we'd build the kind of family we'd both always deserved. As my pregnancy progressed, Ignis Studios continued to thrive. I was working from home more, delegating to my excellent team, and learning to balance ambition with self-care. The house filled with baby gear, ultrasound photos, and paint samples for the nursery. We were building something beautiful, something that was entirely ours. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had to choose yourself over family? Have you ever had to walk away from people who were supposed to love you because staying would destroy you? Drop your story in the comments, because I know I'm not alone in this. And if this story resonated with you, if you've been that person standing in the rain wondering if you'll ever be warm again, hit that like button and subscribe. Your story isn't over yet. Sometimes the family we choose is stronger than the family we're born into. Remember that. You're stronger than you think, and you deserve people who see your worth. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small. You were born to take up space, to shine, to build empires from ashes. Now go out there and prove them wrong.